Okay, the next type of conversion problem that we're going to talk about is derived conversions. Now this is converting an area or a volume that has been calculated using the meter standard. So if you measure something in meters, I could measure the length of this board in centimeters, probably more appropriate. So measure that width in centimeters, that length in centimeters, and then I do that length times width and I get an area. What I'm going to get is centimeters squared. Okay, you can do the same thing with meters. If you have a large area, square meters would be your area unit. Volume, same thing. If I measure the thickness of this board in centimeters as well, it's less than a centimeter, but I would get a decimal. And then I do length times width times height, I'm going to end up with the volume of this board, if it were perfectly rectangular. Okay, but volume in cubic meters, cubic centimeters, cubic millimeters, you can end up with an area or a volume, but our units look different. So you can see these two examples. 4,000 square millimeters is how many square decimeters? Okay, or 4,000 millimeters squared is how many decimeters squared. The unit is squared because it's an area measurement. Okay, this example, 0.0000328 meters cubed is how many millimeters cubed. Okay, so let's take a look at how we're going to approach these problems and how that's different from a simple conversion. Okay, so I still have my metric prefix line. I'm relating two metric units. They have the same standard, millimeter, decimeter. So I'm going to be using this line to relate those units. Okay, so my first step is to figure out what is the relationship between a millimeter and a decimeter. I'm going to ignore the fact that it's squared for right now and just come up with that relationship. Remember, when you have the two letters in your unit, mm, dm, you're looking for that first letter in the line. Okay, so D for my dm, m for my mm. Now I'm going to look at which one gets the 1. Okay, the one that comes first in the line is bigger, and it's going to get the 1. 1 decimeter equals 2 spaces away is 1 with 2 zeros, or 10 squared millimeters. Okay. Now notice when I wrote this, these are not squared. Okay, nothing about this line is squared. Okay, powers of 10 separation in length here. Okay, now this is squared. So when we set up our problem, we're just going to pretend like that's not squared for just a minute, but we're going to just start with what we were given, 4,000 millimeters squared. Okay, and again, I'm trying to cancel millimeters and get to decimeters, but in this case squared. So where would I put the 100 millimeters? Where am I going to put the 1 decimeter? It's based off of what you want to cancel. I want millimeters to cancel. 100 millimeters then is going to go on the bottom, and 1 decimeter on the top, because those are equivalent. But if you look at this, does a millimeter cancel a squared millimeter? Hopefully your answer to that is no, they're not the same. They're close, they're not the same. So one method, and there are other ways to do this, but one method to get rid of a square millimeter is to use this conversion factor again. 100 millimeters is 1 decimeter. These two together is like millimeters times millimeters. And millimeters times millimeters is millimeters squared. So these two together will take out that millimeter squared at the top. And what that leaves us with is decimeters times decimeters, which is decimeters squared. Then I just do some math. 4,000, and these are both on the bottom, so we're dividing. Divide by 100, divide by 100. Don't make the mistake of doing 4,000 divided by 200, because there's two 100s. Don't do that. Divide by 100, divide by 100, and you're going to end up with 0.4 decimeters squared. Now if we're doing a cubic problem, so the other example that I had written on the front of my board was 0.0000328 meters cubed is how many millimeters cubed. Okay? Cubic, very similar. We're going to get a relationship. But a millimeter didn't cancel a millimeter squared. It certainly wouldn't cancel a millimeter cubed. We used this one twice in order to cancel the squared. So hopefully you can jump to that next step here. Whoop, and notice that we're probably going to have to use this 3 times in order to cancel a cubic unit. Okay, relationship between meter and millimeter. Here's our meter, our standard. Here's our millimeter. 1, 2, 3. So 1 meter is 1,000 millimeters. 1 meter will go on the bottom because we eventually want to cancel a cubic meter. 1,000 millimeters on the top. We do that 3 times so that we end up with what would be a cubic meter on the bottom. All 3 of those take out that cubic meter on the top. Multiply by 1,000, multiply by 1,000, multiply by 1,000, and you're going to end up with multiplying by 1,000, multiply by 1,000, multiply by 1,000, 32,800 cubic millimeters. Okay? And again, if you're not super confident with moving your decimal, you can punch it into a calculator and get that answer. So 1 meter on the bottom, 1,000 millimeters on the top, 3 times in order to get rid of a cubic meter on the top, and what you end up with, millimeter times millimeter times millimeter, is millimeters cubed as your final unit. If you need more practice with this, please see our practice video to get a couple of additional problems and practice those out.